I'm gonna start. So we're gonna discuss the Parshas Vayigasg, and in Parshas Vayigasg, the Zohar calls it the meeting of kings. We have the two kings coming together, and it calls it a meeting of worlds. That's how the Zohar coins it. Very interesting way of terming that. It's a meeting of worlds. So where we have Judah, right, the tribe of Yehuda, approaching Yosef. Now, a little bit of context of what's going on over here is that in last week's portion, Benjamin was taken by Yosef, and he was held because of basically a setup. And the whole setup is Yosef is trying to elicit from his brothers a feeling of remorse and a feeling of coming to terms with what they were doing. And this whole process over there of Joseph finding, holding Benjamin causes Yehuda to basically wage war. That's how the Midrash puts it. That Yehuda was ready to go to war against Yosef and all of Egypt. Now, what went on over here is that before Benjamin gets taken down to Egypt, okay, Yaakov says, "No way! I'm not sending my kid. I'm not sending my son with you guys. You know, look at what happened to his brothers. Older brother Joseph got taken by who knows what. So I'm not taking the chance this time." So Yehuda says, well, if we don't bring Yehuda down to Egypt, I'm skipping a lot of information over there, but if we don't bring if we don't bring Benjamin down to Egypt, then the man, Yosef, is not going to give us any food. So we have no chance. So slowly but surely, their supplies are running out. They have no food. And finally, the brothers come to Yaakov and they try to convince him, please let us bring Benjamin down. And first Reuben says, I'll take care of him. Don't worry, if something happens to him, you could kill my two sons. And Yaakov says, that's my oldest son. Like, look at what he's saying. His sons aren't my sons. Go away. And then Judah approaches and Yehuda says, I will give up my entire Olam Haba, my entire next world. And he basically says that I'm putting everything on the line to make sure that Benjamin will be safe and will come back to you. So as they take him down, there's a whole setup with Joseph, and Benjamin gets captured. And at this point, Yehuda is very, very conflicted. He has to bring his little brother home. And if he doesn't bring him home, he's going to lose his whole next world. What does he do? So he goes up to Joseph. And they literally, the way the Midrash puts it, is that Yehuda calls him, he kind of like points his finger at him, and he says, hey, you better let my kid brother out. And imagine doing that to like the leader of the superpower of the world. It's like, some tribesman comes from Canaan, and he's like pointing at the viceroy of Egypt. And the Midrash says he started roaring like a lion, and Yosef was worried, and he shook back. And then Yosef gave him his powerful 2 cents, and he banged on the table, and everything like jumped up, and Yehuda's like, whoa, he's got some strength over there. And they went at each other like that, actually, by exhibiting their strength, where, in fact, Yehuda kind of like thought, well, I know this guy somehow. He can't be like a regular Egyptian. He has to be something with Jacob. He has to have some sort of a yichus, some sort of a connection. Otherwise, he's just too powerful. And it's interesting that the Zohar calls it a meeting of two worlds. So I'd like to touch upon this concept of the meeting of two worlds, and what could we learn from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Joseph. Okay. So the tribe of Judah represents the leader of the other tribes, of the shepherd tribes, right? The leader of the rest of the tribes, the other 10 or perhaps 11, because Benjamin is like a quasi tribe. Who does he belong to? Is he part of the other 10 or is he part of his brother, right? But for all intents and purposes, he's the leader of the 10 tribes. And what's unique about these 10 tribes is that they were shepherds. Now, what do shepherds do? Shepherds hang out in the field and they talk to God and they speak, right? And they meditate and they're out of this world, right? They're away, they're aloof from the world and they're just spiritual beings. And Yehuda represented that. Yehuda represented that worldview of being aloof from the world, of being separated from the world. And in fact, the first thing that Jacob tells Judah after he goes down to Egypt is he sends Yehuda to go and to build a house of study, a Beit Midrash. He sends Yehuda to Goshen. Why? Because without the Beit Midrash, without being kind of like having this place which is away from the world, that's what the Beit Midrash is. And Beit Midrash is, see all these books in back of me over here. Sometimes you could just be like, you sometimes get lost in it. And it's beautiful. But you're like, oh, now I got to take care of this. I got to take care of that. And that's what the tribes did. The tribes were just meditating on godliness, singing to God, learning, right, the deepest depths of creation, about creation, studying the Torah, etc. Whereas Yosef's worldview is diametrically different. We're not opposed, which is what we're going to get to, but it's different. And Yosef represents the man who is righteous, but at the same time in this world, within this world. And that's something that the tribes could not understand. They couldn't recognize this. And in fact, when it says that they couldn't recognize Joseph, right? When they saw him, they said they didn't recognize him. They didn't know who he was. So on the literal understanding level, they didn't know him, recognize him, because he now grew a beard. And he was a kid. He was 17. And now it's 22 years later. Now he looks way different. That's on the literal level. But really, on a deeper level, how could you not know your brother? You know, you have to know that face, right? And when it says that they didn't recognize his brother, they couldn't recognize his level of divine service of God. They couldn't recognize that you could have a righteous person living in Egypt, not just living in Egypt, but being the viceroy of Egypt. And who knows how busy this Joseph was. I mean, super busy. Like running a whole country, running the economy of the country. You know, you can't even imagine how many emails he was getting per day. Just thank God it was before email time. That's why he was probably able to do that. But he was inundated, right? Just swamped with that, with the WhatsApps and the this and the that. Whoa. But Joseph was righteous, and he was like grounded in his righteousness. So I'd like to speak about what led Yehuda to be Yehuda, and what are those advantages, and perhaps maybe disadvantages, and what led Joseph to be Joseph, and the advantages and the disadvantages over there. So, bye-bye. So, they're the real teachers, you know? We just have to listen to the babies. Our inner baby as well. So let's start off with Judah, with Yehuda. So what led Yehuda to be Yehuda? So we know Yehuda is like unlike any other tribe. It's almost like dramatical, the way he's described in the verses, where he makes a mistake. He is intimate with his daughter-in-law, right? He didn't know it was her. He thought that she was basically a prostitute, and which is also leads the question. He's one of the tribes. What's going on over here? And why did that happen? So it's explained that in the holy books, I think the Or HaChaim says it, that that Judah could not control himself. He didn't have a choice in not making this mistake. So it was like a divinely ordained avera, mistake. Like he was forced into it, and it's not anything that anybody could replicate, and anybody could think that, okay, this happened and therefore it's true. Everything is divinely ordained. However, Judah had to go through this process, and he had to become a Baal Tshuva. He had to become a master of Teshuvah. And he represents this person who's a Baal Tshuva, who's very fragile, who's very sensitive. And what is a Baal Tshuva? A Baal Tshuva is kind of like, they were in the world, they made mistakes, they were, right, they tasted the taste of sin, as the Talmud says, and they decide to like go the other way. So it's explained that the Baal Tshuva has to remove himself or herself from where they were, right? And on all levels, they have to remove themselves, and that's what Yehuda exemplifies. He exemplifies being the master of tshuva, making a mistake, owning up to his mistake. Says that's actually his name. His name Yehuda means to admit. L'hoda'ah. He admitted his mistake, and that made him into a real man. Like I tell my kids, own up to something. You make a mistake, be a real man, and say, I made a mistake. And that's what we have to do. And Yehuda does that. But Yehuda, after that situation, and probably before that as well, he was kind of like, oh man, he's kind of like scared to like venture out of his state of Baal Tshuva, of venturing out of the house of learning, of the Beit Midrash. Because if he's going to venture out, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe that's going to happen again. And he doesn't want to fall. So he is somebody who is in the Beit Midrash, and he personifies this success of being in the Beit Midrash and growing in Torah knowledge and in understanding and in depth and in prayer and everything like that. Now, on the other hand, we have Joseph, who also almost made a mistake, but he didn't make a mistake. He was about to make a mistake. And what happened to him? Something similar to the story of Judah, but he didn't stumble. Now, the story is the story from last week's Parsha, that the wife of Potiphar approaches Joseph and keeps on calling out to him day after day after day until finally nobody was in the house, and she threw herself at Joseph. And Joseph, it says he didn't know what to do. And in fact, it's brought down in Kabbalistic works that she represented, the wife of Potiphar represented the snake, the power of the snake, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination of the snake. And it was so powerful that imagine having the entire Yetzer Hara, entire like evil inclination of everybody that's living in the world all together within one human being. It was that strong. And Joseph didn't know what to do. It wasn't just his Yetzer Hara, but he realized that what this Nisayon was about, what this test was about, was a test which was beyond him, which has to do with something of fixing the world. And what is that about? So Kabbalistically, it's explained that Joseph was the cherished son of Jacob, and Yaakov represents the sphere of Tiferet, and Yosef is Hod, is Yesod, and that channel of above to below is the channel of Yaakov and Yosef, because it's the channel of drawing down. Whereas the other tribes represented the right side and the left side, and they represented a connection between the two sides. They represented they're called Shvatim, they're called a Shevet, because what is a Shevet? A Shevet is actually like a staff, and a staff kind of like draws from one side to the other, represents the right and the left. whereas Joseph was the channel which drew down godliness from a higher source to the lower source. And Yaakov is an extension of Keter, of crown. And what is this? What is crown about? Crown represents Adam Kadmon, primordial man, which represented Adam, represents Adam's face. And it says that all these three tzaddikim had the same face. That Yaakov had the face of Adam, and Yosef had the face of Yaakov. So what comes out is that Yosef is really the fixing of Adam, and the wife of Potipharah was a rehashing, right, of the snake, like a gilgul of the snake again, coming at him. And at this point, Yosef had to hold himself back, where Adam had to fix that sin of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, and Yosef had to put aside his knowledge and to work on his Yetzer Hara. And in fact, it says in the Midrash that he was about to fail. But what saved him? That from the window he saw an image of his father's face, and his father was saying to him, or just seeing the face, and he was telling him that if you fail, you are not going to be on the choshen. You're not going to be on the breastplate of the high priest, right? You won't be there. And because he succeeded, Yosef is the only one that is called Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous one, right? Because he actually became righteous and he overcame his temptation, and he's the only tzaddik that is called Yosef the Tzaddik. So we have Yosef and we have Judah representing these polar extremes. Judah represents the life of the Baal Tshuva, the fragile life of the Baal Tshuva, somebody that stumbles, somebody that makes mistakes, somebody that's been down, right? And then he's working on himself to become better. And Yosef represents the life of the tzaddik, of the righteous person that never stumbles. So what could we learn from these two worldviews? So what we could learn from these two worldviews is the importance of each and every one of them. So there's a time in our life and in our day that we have to be Judah-like. And what I mean by that is that we have to kind of be away from the world. And we have to spend time. First thing that we do in the mornings is we say Modeh Ani, which has the words Yehuda in it, right? So it's the first thing that we do is we actually become Judah-like in our consciousness. We have to know where it's at, know that consciousness, and then make time in our lives to actually learn, to study. And if a person is fortunate enough to be in a yeshiva or a seminary or something like that they could actually grow and they could actually, really take in as much as they can, then they're extremely fortunate, because the majority of their life is not going to be in those settings. It's going to be in the day-to-day, right? And then on a daily level, we have to be Judah-like also in terms of how much time we're allocating to the study of Torah and to prayer. So that needs to be a priority of something that we do in our lives, specifically in the morning, that we spend time in prayer and in study. So we're aloof from the world, away from the world. But then comes a time in majority of a person's life is that a person is in the world. Now, what is the purpose of being in the world? Of actually affecting the world and actually drawing down a higher level of godliness in the world. In other words, being in the business world, for example, being in a place which is, not readily obviously, a place of godliness. It's right. It's not like we said, like the house of study, the Beit Midrash, or any place of prayer. Right. A person is in the world. It's in the here and now. But that's the lesson that we learned from Joseph. The lesson that we learned from Joseph is that he was able to channel down. Not only he was able to channel down godliness and draw, and that was his life mission, but that is really on a deeper level. That's the whole mission of the world. The deeper mission of the world is to actually draw down godliness in the places of the permissible. Whereas Judah, who represents the Baal Tshuva, he can't go into the world of the permissible that much. He's kind of like worried what's going to happen, because he came from that world, and he doesn't want to go back into that world. So he has to put fences and boundaries. The world of Joseph teaches us that the ultimate is actually is the world of the permissible, and to uplift it and to uplift it, first of all, is to draw down godliness. That's the word Yosef means. Yosef is to add. In other words, it's an addition to what is already there. So there's the potential of what is, but then Yosef is the idea of adding more. Yosef. And what Yosef does is he adds another.
Doesn't it also mean to increase?
Yosef means to increase, exactly. And that exactly, Yosef is to add, to increase, and that's what he's doing. He's increasing godliness within the world, and by doing that, what Joseph.
When you said earlier that Yosef.
Say it again, Talia. Didn't hear that.
Well, I was saying that you said Yosef is the rectification of Adam, but isn't right. And it's interesting. I once heard that Moshe was the rectification. There's a connection with Moshe and Yosef.
There's a connection between all the 7 shepherds, basically, but there's the deepest connection is between Yosef, that is the midah of Yesod, basically.
Right, foundation to that which are.
And Tiferet and Keter and crown, which is the direct channel from above down to below. And Yehuda represents Malchut. Yehuda represents kingship. So,
right, because the world we have to go through first is Yosef to get to Yehuda to get to the
exactly, and that's what I want to say, and that's the meaning of the Zohar. That it's a meeting of the 2 kings, that this is where the 2 kings come together. And it's a meeting of the 2 worlds. Because the truth is, we need both. We need to be both Joseph-like and Judah-like. So we need to be Judah-like in the sense of actually safeguarding our steps and being cautious and prioritizing our time for spirituality, for spiritual matters, and that's kind of like the uplifting of Malchut, of the king of Malchut, because Malchut is allowed.
That's like Jacob's dream of going up and down the ladder. Joseph is coming down; he has to go up.
Right. Well, Malchut, if Malchut is allowed as is, so then Malchut could be obliterated by what the Zohar calls the other forces. The negative forces. If Malchut isn't channeled with it's
just receiving it.
The direction. So then it would take Malchut to the wrong places, and that's why Malchut is kind of like this 2-way. It could either be within the klipot or within the realm of holiness. But Yosef is the channeling down. Now, both of them need each other, right? Both of them need each other, and this is the uniqueness of the reading of this week's parsha. And I believe that's the energy. That's kind of like the inner dimension of what we could like zone into. Is this balance? It's this harmony of on the one hand being proactive, and on the one hand being very within the world and changing the world, and like Joseph was doing. But then on the other hand, holding back and kind of like setting times for spiritual matters. And for example, this class over here, you could have, let's say, you could be making calls, you could be exchanging stocks on the market, you could be making money. I don't know what, but you're taking time to study, and that's a Judah-like experience, activity, to take the time and to hold back from, everything else that I perhaps want to do, right? But then it's important to actually, when we do what we do, and be Joseph-like, to do it all the way and to be infused with this time that we had for spirituality, right? So that's what Judah gives to Joseph, right? Yehuda kind of like, that's the balance that Malchut gives to Yesod. But then on the other hand, Joseph gives to Malchut the completion and the ability to be able to not to be frightened, to go out of the comfort zone, right? Because the comfort zone of a Baal Tshuva is, as we said, like very limited. And to say, like, you know what, just go, don't be scared, just go do the,
He's a dreamer.
You do what you need to do. He's a dreamer, exactly, and you just keep on doing what you need to do. If you need to take on the world, just go. Like don't be scared. And that's the strength that Joseph gives to us. Joseph gives to Judah, right? And Judah once again gives Joseph the strength of being balanced and being like anchored, right? Malchut is like that anchoring. So it's that healthy balance of what we call Za, Zer, Anpin, and Malchut coming together is the healthy balance that each of them represents. And on the one hand, Joseph is higher, because it says Judah went to Joseph. Vayigasg elav Yehuda. But then we know in the Haftarah, it says that at the end of days, it says that the children of Joseph, which is Ephraim and all those kings from the northern part of Israel, when the kingdoms were divided, if you recall, we had 2 kingdoms in Israel, right? We had the kingdom of Judah, and then we had the kingdom of the 10 tribes. So this was kind of like flipped. Judah was left on its own, and then we had like Ephraim. Ephraim was like the leader of the other tribes, and where Joseph kind of tried to take charge of that, which is very interesting. But then it says in the Haftarah, it says in the prophets over there, that there's 2 sticks. That there's the stick of right on it, the stick of Judah, and then the stick of Ephraim, and says that both of them will come together, and I will have only one king. And who's that one king? King David. David avdi melech leolam. And my servant, my David is going to be a king forever. He is the ultimate king. So in our parsha, we see the advantage of Joseph over Judah, and in the Haftarah, we see the advantage of Judah over Joseph, which is very interesting. We see that in King David. And the truth is, why is that? Because we're going to see the advantage, okay, of the world of the Baal Tshuva versus the world of the righteous one that just never stumbled, and they're not scared of doing what they need to do. They're righteous. But we're going to see the advantage of the Baal Tshuva, and we also see that by King David.
You can relate to the Benoni.
Yeah. King David lived that life, mamish. King David,
and that's like the Benoni.
The Benoni, right? Exactly, and that's the book of the Benoni, right? Of the Tanya, and that's what the Alter speaks about. And why is King David going to be the king? Because ultimately, it's about the transformation of the world of the permissible, and it's the transformation of the Baal Tshuva's existence to kind of like reveal that godliness exists everywhere. Because for Joseph, it's not what we call a chidush. It's not like a novelty that everywhere is godliness exists. But for Judah, it's a novelty. And when Judah experiences that it's actually a reality, so then that is like Mashiach. That is the level of like the highest revelation. And that's the revelation of King David. That's the revelation that we're going to see, please God, soon. That basically everything exists from him and within nature. It's coming from the world of Malchut. That Mother Earth is going to like show her sense of godliness, right? And it's incredible. You know, I was thinking about this concept the other day that right now we're in the generation. These last 50 years or so have been more of a feminine generation. Why is that? Because when Mashiach comes, is going to be more the idea of the feminine aspect of Malchut is going to be expressed. And I was thinking about this, you know, the whole idea of Facebook and the whole idea of, you know, Twitter and all this social media kind of a thing. It's really a very female-like thing. I mean, honestly, I don't like that. I don't like Facebook. I don't like, you know, because as a male, we're both, right? But as a male, I'm like more of like, you know, focused. But the idea of the female generation is like, what did I have for breakfast and what I did here, right, where I went there, and where it's like talking about, like, instead of speaking to somebody on the phone, it's like it's all just put out there. Right. And obviously it's used for the good. It could be used. That's why it's there. It's used for the good, and it's actually an expression of Malchut, right? Of Malchut within this world. And why is that? Because we are coming to that stage. We're coming to a time right now that Malchut is going to be expressed in its totality, where we're going to be using all these modes, all these mechanisms, right? All these social media kind of things in order to promote godliness. So from within the world itself is going to sing out godliness. So that's the message. That's the lesson that I believe is a very, very important lesson, very, very practical lesson that we could take out of the parsha, and something that we could live with and contemplate on the importance of both. Contemplate on the importance of setting time in our day to study and to pray and for spirituality. That's Judah. And the other thing is Joseph-like. Joseph-like is channeling godliness within the world, and to take on the world, and right, like that, and to be successful in everything that we do. That's Joseph-like, and knowing that, and that balance of the two is the balance that is expressed in this week's parsha, and it's something that.
It's so interesting, but I look at Yosef in all his dreaming as such a visionary. I see that more in a way that is not grounded. He's always finding.
Well, he's the visionary. Right, but he's the visionary, Joseph, and he comes from the world of Yesod, and Yesod is the practicality of it. So Yesod draws from Tiferet, draws from Keter. So he's able to just Yesod. That's why Yesod is actually the holiest, one of the holiest sfirot. You know, Kabbalistic, the number 6. The whole idea of Yesod is like a very, very high thing, because Yesod is Yesod means foundation, and the foundation, right, has within it the entire structure. So you could have a building which is 100 floors up. It all starts from the foundation. So the foundation is rooted, right, has within it everything above it. So when Joseph was dreaming, he was dreaming and dreaming, but he was bringing it all down. He was working on it. But on the same level, Yesod is a conduit to go into Malchut. into the world of Malchut. And when the two of them combine, so we have this perfect structure, an edifice of basically of the world of Malchut and this world, and the balance right down here in the physical world. So may we merit to have this healthy balance between these two worlds, and may we merit to see this joining of these two kings coming together very soon, and may we merit to see the King David, who is a Nasi Elahem, that there's going to be one king, that's a King David, that's going to be a leader for the other type of a king, and with that we're going to see the expression of godliness within the world itself, and it's going to reveal and open up what has been veiled for us for so long. So